One day, Eve noticed that she was putting on weight, and this greatly distressed her. Then she began to see strange things about Adam's conduct. Undeniably, his love was rapidly weakening. He yawned in the heat of passionate kisses, things that had never happened before. Then he fell asleep when Eve was not ready for sleep, and wanted him to tell her about the stars. After that, Eve was sure that Adam's character was changing for the worse. She noticed it especially when he was hungry for the fruit. At such times, he became irritable, nagging, and altogether insufferable. In the mornings, instead of his usual kisses and caresses, he had a passionate desire for the fruit. And until he had had his fill, he did not even glance at Eve. Eve was very offended by this. But even though she submitted unwillingly to the new routine, she was at pains to prepare more of the fruit for Adam, so that he would be well fed and would not find fault with her. Observing it all, we were beside ourselves with delight. Adam and Eve began to take on a resemblance to ordinary people, that is, the descendants of the animals. Without being aware of it, Adam and Eve got into the habit of eating very much more fruit than was necessary. And in fact, they soon began to suffer when they had no fruit, or when they thought the fruit was scarce. And whenever this happened, they found it hard to talk about the unreality of things, because the reality of the fruit spoke for itself. Otherwise, why should they not satisfy their needs with imaginary fruit? But imaginary fruit certainly did not satisfy them. They needed the real, genuine fruit of the earth in exactly the same way as the descendants of the animals. This was the beginning of our victory. A small cause sometimes has huge effects, and it was enough for Adam and Eve, in the case of the fruit, to admit the reality of matter, for reality to seep into them from all directions. Adam and Eve soon realized that they lacked much that they needed. They would wish for things that were not there, and rage when they did not materialize. Discontentment with the world gradually took hold of them. Suffering began increasingly to enter their lives. It was then that the ridiculous, irrational joy they experienced on account of trifles, a flower or a butterfly, sunshine, rain, wind, clouds, thunderstorms, and goodness knows what beside, which had disgusted us most, began to wane, and in the end almost completely disappeared. The sun now was burning them, the rain drenched them, the thunderstorms frightened them, and wind made them feel cold, and so on. At the same time, the hallucinations they suffered came less often. What they called the world of the miraculous gradually faded and vanished from their view. We were very glad because, although it is certain that no such miraculous world exists, these hallucinations frightened us. In general, everything that they called magic ceased, and they lost the ability to disappear from us at will. However, even all this was only the beginning. Things became serious from the time they started to quarrel. You see, when this foolish magic business ceased, their life became boring, though it was long before they became aware of this discontentment with life and with their situation. From time to time, their situation began to overflow into dissatisfaction with one another. Misunderstandings arose, and finally one fine day they had their first quarrel. This came about exactly as it usually does. Eve teased Adam about the amount of fruit he had eaten that morning. More than likely, her joke did reveal certain hidden resentments against Adam. Maybe it was not the first time she had teased him like that. In any case, it annoyed Adam, for he felt the ache of hunger for the fruit in his stomach, and he was very disgruntled with himself. He answered Eve sharply. Eve was offended and replied loudly that she could not tolerate such a tone of voice or such treatment. They began to argue, and within 2 minutes the quarrel was in full swing. "You never listen to me properly. You always reply to the first half of a sentence," Adam said, very nearly shouting, "Let me speak." "You don't speak. You yell. I don't want to listen to you at all while you're in this mood," said Eve, greatly irritated. "Listen to me. You are interrupting me again, I say." "Yes, I'm interrupting you, and I will go on interrupting you because I don't want to listen," and so on, in a similar vein. They stood face to face and stared at each other with outright hatred. It was then that they first noticed they were naked. It seemed terribly wicked and shameful, especially to Eve. She ran off into the woods and made clothes for herself out of leaves. Adam, to show her that he was not offended as well, made himself some clothes too. They did not speak to each other for a whole day following this incident. After that, everything went as if rehearsed. They began to quarrel nearly every day, and soon they were arguing several times a day. No matter what Adam wanted, Eve unfeignedly desired the opposite. She contradicted whatever he said more often than not, adding several very caustic remarks. They started disagreeing and ended up shouting and quarreling. Eve discovered a great many shortcomings in Adam. When he spoke to her, having entirely forgotten the previous day's quarrel, Eve, to him, totally irrationally would tell him exactly what she thought of him. At first, on such occasions, Adam would listen patiently without answering back. He simply sat and ate the fruit, which Eve, in spite of everything, still prepared for him. Later on, however, some really uncalled for remark would provoke him, and he would start to object. Eve would take offense at his retort. Adam would raise his voice. They would begin to speak at the same time and interrupt each other, and so the quarrel proceeded. Every day there was some new development, so that it was impossible to tell what they were going to quarrel about next. There was no harmony in their lives anymore. If Eve wanted to go out somewhere for a visit, Adam had to gather fruit. If Eve wanted Adam to stay at home, he always found somewhere he had to go. Then Eve would feel hurt that he had left her alone. And of course, she immediately convinced herself that Adam had gone to Lilith, his first wife, whom he had divorced when God created Eve. Well, it all ended like this. After one of the worst rows, Eve left the cave where she lived with Adam, vowing never to return. The next day she sent her maid for her things. "Maid?" I asked. "Well, yes, maid," said the devil. Adam was terribly angry, then frightened. He asked for forgiveness and swore he would never hurt Eve again. But Eve did not return. And it seemed to Adam that the monkeys who lived in the palm trees in front of the cave were all laughing at him and shouting, "Here is Adam, abandoned by Eve." A long time later they were reconciled, but you must understand that things were not the same now. There was no longer any magic in their lives. Eve blamed Adam for this. Adam thought the fault lay with Eve. For this reason, they started quarreling again. Eve went away again, and so on. In the end, Adam got himself, at one fell swoop, 3 more wives from a dark tribe living nearby. And Eve took up with a young fawn who played the flute of a morning. The fawn turned out to be very stupid and soon bored her. So she made friends with a nymph from a mountain stream and declared all men to be completely uninteresting. After that, they were ours. Adam began to earn his own bread by the sweat of his brow. But whenever possible, he would follow the example of the descendants of the animals, preferring not to earn his bread, but to take it from others, or to make them work for him. The legend about paradise, however, persisted among the descendants of Adam and Eve for a long time, and it was reputed that their ancestors were exiled from paradise because of some crime. This is actually our version of the story, and we made several more changes at the same time. For instance, we let people think that it is we who are the descendants of the Great One, and that the Great One rebelled against God. We twisted facts so thoroughly that only a few people are capable of unraveling the truth. That is why, as I told you at the beginning of our talk, it is so difficult for me to explain the real position to you. You see, you are in error quite as much on our account as on your own. The descendants of Adam interbred with the descendants of the animals to such a degree that it became quite difficult to distinguish them. As a result, there came about many curious situations and misunderstandings. At times, even we could not tell the difference between them. For instance, many of us would buy souls of the descendants of Adam, only to find out that they had no souls. This happened because the descendants of the animals pretended to be the descendants of Adam, and even we fell for it. So, the descendants of the animals have no souls? Of course not. Souls do not exist as such. What is a soul? It is only a collective term for the diverse phenomena of psychophysical life. On the other hand, the existence of some kind of soul is admitted by the descendants of Adam, that is, the genuine descendants of Adam. They think of it as something like a family heirloom which is handed down by successive generations. Sometimes we buy these souls when they are for sale. You see, we are collectors, and we collect things which have neither value nor meaning to anybody except us. The devil was obviously rather confused. The thing is that this interbreeding with the animal's descendants, he continued, is only external. Our tradition maintains that so long as the descendants of Adam retain their souls, they can go away from us. Does that frighten you? Oh yes. But we love them, so we make every effort to prevent them from going away. How do you do it then? Well, we use many different methods. First of all, of course, we endeavor to prevent their separation from the descendants of the animals. That is our main problem. Without realizing it, the descendants of Adam are trying the whole time to separate themselves from the descendants of the animals. We struggle against this separation either by assuring Adam's descendants that the descendants of the animals are their brothers and have souls like their own, or on the contrary, by convincing them that they all are descendants of the animals and that none of them has a soul. You grasp our idea, the idea of equality and fraternity. More than anything else, it discourages the separation of the two. But the descendants of Adam are unable to carry such a load for long, and they are constantly sinking under the weight of it and surrendering to those same descendants of the animals. As a result, the descendants of animals have taken possession of the earth and the descendants of Adam are serving them. But why do they serve? I still don't understand, I said. Because the descendants of the animals are unable to manage without the descendants of Adam, said the devil. You see, they cannot do anything on their own. Like monkeys, all they can do is copy what the descendants of Adam have done, or alternatively, destroy whatever comes their way. But Adam's descendants can create and destroy endlessly. Where they lead, all life follows. Without them, the descendants of the animals would not have got far. But Adam's descendants are not free. They are subordinate to the animals. That is why they so often destroy what they themselves have built. Are the descendants of the animals not even capable of destruction, then? Oh, they destroy all right, said the devil. They can destroy very well, but in fact, they can even build to only, how shall I put it, after a pattern that already exists. The point is that in general, everything they do by themselves, even destruction, is talentless and marked by utter futility. A combination of boredom, apathy, and absurdity. I expect you've seen this kind of work. It is for this reason that the descendants of Adam are generally valued, although it is essential to keep them firmly in hand. But the descendants of the animals are not as helpless as they used to be in the early days. They have evolved markedly during that time, that is, since the death of Adam. Take a look at the whole of contemporary culture, techniques of engineering, industry, and commerce. During that same period, Adam's descendants have remained virtually on the same level as before. You understand. For descendants of Adam, evolution does not exist. They have everything, only they do not know it. And they consider themselves to be something quite different from what they are. Yet, when they come across something that they have in fact forgotten about, that very thing they regard in the light of evolution. But this description, which applies to everything they encounter, lies entirely in their own minds. To continue, the descendants of Adam have a great many prejudices and a kind of atavism which prevents them from living in the present. The descendants of animals do not have any trace of this atavism. For instance, basically, the descendants of Adam place no value on things and attach little significance to material wealth. They don't have sufficient flexibility of mind and of imagination, qualities which are, on the other hand, very highly developed among the descendants of the animals. Flexibility, I said? Well, yes, the descendants of Adam only vaguely understand, for instance, that it is possible to think of one thing, say another, and do a third. Their intellect is not capable of grasping such ideas, or seeing that a person can have completely different standards for himself and for others, whereby he can, for instance, allow and condone any act he performs himself, while forbidding and condemning the same thing in another. Essentially, they wish everything to be constant, that a truth proved in one case should be equally true in all other cases. But the descendants of the animals rightly think that would make life very dull. There would be no variety. All this shows, of course, a certain narrow-mindedness in the descendants of Adam. I should add, furthermore, while we are on the subject, that they are never satisfied with form and appearances, but are always striving for the essence, thereby creating for themselves many unnecessary problems. Take, for example, religious questions. The descendants of the animals happened also to be very religious, but their religion does not interfere with their lives. They are able to adapt it to suit their way of life. If they do something particularly unpleasing, they usually say they are acting out of religious motives, and that it is the will of God. When the descendants of the animals pray, they always ask God to give them something, mainly things belonging to their neighbors, which they covet. If they meet a person who does not pray as they do, in quite a different manner, they think it unworthy of praise to give him a kick in the teeth. This tendency has had many interesting consequences and has contributed much to the livening up of history. Adam's descendants do not understand any of this. They do not know how to separate religion from life and draw, as it were, two parallel lines. The descendants of the animals understand perfectly that life is a raw deal and that sentiment has no place in it. They understand that in life might is right, and they act accordingly. The descendants of the animals always imagine that somebody wants to take away from them what they consider to be their property. 9/10 of their time, or sometimes all 10/10, is occupied with thoughts of how to keep intact what belongs to them and how to acquire the belongings of their fellow men. Adam's descendants always give way to them in this respect, as in many others. And besides, many of them adhere to the fantasies of old. For you see, they still retain dim memories of life before the fall. You still consider these fantasies to be a danger then, I said. They are not dangerous, said the devil, but all the same, we think it advisable to be forewarned to take precautions. But what precautions can you take? I don't understand. There are various ways, said the devil. I would tell you about two particularly amusing cases. There was once a hermit who studied various ways of interpreting the world's religious teaching, doctrines, both secret and well-known, and such writings as were available at that time. Among these he found a number of misrepresentations, deliberate as well as unintentional. He expounded his investigations in a book which he intended to have printed. I came to him in the guise of a hermit and said, "You are writing a book." "Yes," he said. "You want to tell people the truth, the whole truth, without any concealment as you understand it." "Yes," he said. "I believe that to be the best way. The truth has been hidden from the people for far too long." "I see your point," said I. "I endorse your opinion, sympathize with your point of view, and find it exceptionally noble and valuable. For all that, I should not print your book." "Why?" he asked at the last. "Because, my kind and dear friend, you still do not understand the emotion which has been your guiding principle." "What kind of emotion would that be?" he asked. "What kind? I will tell you. It's egoism. Egoism and striving for self-assertion, selfishness." He was staggered. "Egoism," he said, "but I never considered myself." "You did not consider yourself?" I said sarcastically. "And whom do you think you were considering? Was it others that you were thinking of them? Did you give thought to the fact that your book will destroy their beliefs, will deprive them of hope and consolation?" "No, you have not thought about that. But according to you, that is not egoism." "No, my esteemed friend, it is a common, naive intelligence speaking to you. You wanted to show people your truth. Where is your love of others in that? Where the moral? Where's the sense of duty? Where the striving to help people to alleviate the burdens of life? You have found your truth for yourself. Keep it to yourself then. Do not rob the people of their truth. Light your own fire. Do not put out someone else's, and so on and so forth. Would you believe it? This nonsense impressed him deeply. What should I do? He asked. Do not think only of yourself, I said. And I gave him plenty of useful advice. As a result, the work of the hermit became a collection of lies. His book was later quoted as proof of those very theories he wanted to disprove. The other case was even more amusing. A large crowd of people once joined together and decided to fight against evil. It was a very naive suggestion, for people have been fighting evil from the beginning of time. As a result of this opposition, evil is growing and flourishing. So at first we paid no attention to them. But later on matters proved worse than we had thought. A dangerous idea had occurred to these people. There is no need for active opposition, they said. Active resistance strengthens the evil. We will do our utmost only to make people understand what is good and what is evil. Let us explain to them in every single case where evil is, of what the evil consists and whence it springs. You can imagine how this explanation of evil began to have results soon felt by all of us. Our fraternity became uneasy. I was entrusted with dealing with the problem. I put 2 plans into operation. First of all, I assembled the descendants of the animals. I tried to bring home to them the potential danger to society represented by the activity of these people who sought to fight against evil. I spoke many fine words on culture, civilization, the common good, and the necessity for sacrifice and so on. As a result, the struggle with evil was declared to be a crime which weakened and corrupted mankind.